in the Office of Admission, and I'm joined today by Abraham Salinas from the Financial Aid Department. And we're just going to do a brief financial aid overview before we hop into financial aid. We will kind of go over the admission process really quickly just to make sure that everyone who's here understands that a little bit. So if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We do have some other friends here, Lizette Green and Jessica Mascote, who will be answering any questions that you have in the chat. So if you have questions as we go, please feel free to drop those in the chat, and then we will also have a brief Q&A session at the end. So welcome. Welcome to TCU. Honestly, we wish you were here on campus, but we understand, and we're so glad to have this virtual space to really kind of give you an overview about the resources that are available here at TCU. Here at TCU, we have about 10,000 undergraduate students, which makes us about a mid-sized university. The great part about being a mid-sized university is that we have about a 13-to-1 student to faculty ratio. So that means that students are going to have opportunities as far as having those support systems, whether that be in person, whether that be virtually, but overall, lots of opportunities to have resources here on campus. Our average class size is about 22 students, which is really great. The only time that might change is if you maybe are taking some of your gen eds, but the biggest classroom we have on campus only holds about 150 students. Moving forward, we have about 90 different countries represented on campus. That's something we're super proud of at TCU. Diversity is something that we pride ourselves on, and something that we always are desiring to grow more and to make sure that more people have opportunities in our space to learn and to grow as individuals. We have a 94% retention rate. This is talking mostly about students from the first year to the sophomore year. So freshman year to sophomore year. 94% of the people who come as freshmen come back as sophomore. So that goes into some of the statistics that are floating around that you may have heard. Like we have #1 ranked happiest students across US institutions and universities. We also rank really highly in our dorms. We do have a on-campus living requirement for your first 2 years. But that's really a great thing because it really does help students build that sense of community here on campus, which honestly is something that is hard to live without. Then moving along, we are ranked top 100 in the national universities, and we are very proud of that because it's not something that's easy to come by. All right, moving on to more of admissions. So now you know why you would want to come to TCU. Let's talk about what the review process is on our end once we receive your application. We will be talking a little bit more about the timeline, but first, let me just tell you about this holistic review process that we use. So as you see, the biggest chunk of our review is going to be academics. So we do take in consideration like course rigor, GPA, whether those are AP, IP, or dual enrollment. Basically, the rigor is going to be very dependent on the high school that you go to and what is available at your school. So we're not going to penalize you if you don't have as many opportunities as other people. We're really trying our best to make sure that everybody's on equal playing fields, excuse me. Then we also take into consideration your co-curriculars. So that's anything you're involved on your high school campus, as well as outside of your high school campus. I think a lot of times students will hear the word extracurricular and think, oh, I'm not part of that club. I'm not a part of many clubs because I have responsibilities at my home. If that's the case for you, great. Like we don't want to diminish any experience that you have. So when you're telling us about your co-curriculars, make sure that if you're involved at home, maybe you have to drive your 5 younger siblings around. We get it, it's part of life, and we really want to know that about you. And it helps us see kind of that responsibility piece that we're looking for. Then for the TCU application, you will be required to write 2 short answer essays. These are about 300 to 400 words. I personally say nothing too much to stress about, but once again, this is going to be your opportunity to kind of paint us the full picture. Tell us your whole story of who you are and why TCU is a great fit for you. And then finally, we require 1 teacher recommendation and 1 counselor recommendation. Now, just a tidbit from me. I don't know if all the admission counselors say this, but something on my end, I feel if you go to a huge high school, maybe your counselor has about 500 other students that they're over, and you feel like you don't really have that close relationship with your counselor, we're still going to require that counselor recommendation, but feel free to get an additional teacher recommendation, and it will kind of supplement, and that way we can still get that full picture because that really is TCU's way. We want to know the people. We want to create the sense of community. And honestly, we have a great privilege, and opportunity to be able to do that, especially here in the TCU, and Fort Worth community. So really quickly before I pass the mic, I am going to drop a poll. And if you could all just answer the poll, um, that would be very great. Sorry, just give me one moment. All right, so this first one should be popping up. Right now, 0% of you have answered. So I will end the poll when about 90% of us have answered, okay? Just give it a few more seconds. All righty. Great. So thank you all. It looks like a lot of us have applied to TCU. We're really excited about that. If you're still deciding whether or not to apply, don't worry. Hopefully by the end of this session, you'll know that you should apply to TCU, and hopefully this really gives you a good overview of why maybe you should be deciding to come to TCU. All right, our next question is, do you plan on filing the FAFSA or TASPA, and the CSS profile? So once again, I'll give that about 30 seconds. So please feel free. All right. Perfect. Thank you. And then one last question is about student involvement. So what kind of things do you want to be involved in? It says, which activities are you interested in participating in when you get to college? I'm gonna give this one a little more time because it looks like we have a lot more responses. So I'll give you all a little more time. All right, great. Perfect. Thank you all so much for doing that. One thing I did forget to mention before I pass the mic, is about our merit scholarships. So merit scholarships are going to be those scholarships that are based primarily off of your high school grades. But once again, when we're taking a look at academic scholarships, and I believe Abraham will cover this a little more. But specifically for academic scholarships, we are still taking that holistic approach. So yes, it's going to be really beneficial for you to have high GPA, SAT, ACT scores. But at the same time, we're not just looking at those things. We're looking at a little bit of everything. Like I mentioned before, we're trying to get that full picture of a student. And then as far as test scores, I know that that's a big question for a lot of students. We are test optional through 2026. So that means that if you have taken the SAT or ACT, you're welcomed to submit those scores. Great thing about TCU is we do have a test optional policy, which means that if you submit your test score and they end up hindering your application in any way, so say for example, it lowers your scholarship qualification, we'll turn a blind eye to the test scores and look at it as if you had never submitted them. So we are test optional. That is part of the academics. So if it does help your application, that's great for you. But if any way it harms you, you don't have to worry about deciding whether or not to submit your test scores. Okay. Without further ado, I want to make sure Abraham has enough time. I'm going to pass the mic to him. And like I mentioned earlier, please feel free to drop questions in the chat. This will be recorded for everyone, so that way it will be sent out to the email that you used to register. But without further ado, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. Again, everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Abraham Salinas, or I just go by Abe as well. I'm one of the current financial aid advisors here at TCU, and I'm happy to help you, whether you want to come visit us in person, give us a phone call, shoot us an email. We'll give you our contact information at the end of the presentation as well. But the purpose of today is really just to go over the general application process, as well as what financial aid looks like at TCU, elsewhere as well. And we'll just get right into it, honestly. So the first thing I wanted to mention is the students out there, especially, make sure you're doing your due diligence and asking all the questions you have regarding all of these topics here, the application process, what the deadlines look like, the cost as well, and of course, getting the contact information you need moving forward. That being said, that goes for anything on campus. So not just from our offices, but anywhere else that you're interested in learning more about, make sure you're reaching out so you can get that information and using our websites, etc. But when it comes to the actual process for TCU, here is kind of what a subject to change deadline timeline looks like as of right now. As you can see on the far left, you have where we are at right now, which is October, November, where we have our early decision, early action deadlines coming up really soon. And then one thing to note from the financial aid piece specifically is the FAFSA is set to come out and be available to all students and families on December 1st. That is what it is as of today. That again is of course subject to change as it was last year. So for sure, keep a lookout for any information involving the FAFSA coming from either us as well as the Department of Education. That being said, moving forward, we will be giving out financial aid awards after we received all, application information starting sometime in January. More than likely, it may be a little bit later, depending on how the FAFSA comes out. But subject to change, of course, this is what the timeline may look like as of today. All right. And moving forward, what types of financial aid you will see at TCU specifically. So on the left-hand side, you have scholarships and grants. That's the free aid, the free money you don't have to pay back. It's the stuff we all want to see, right? Under scholarships, you have different types. You have your academic or merit-based scholarships that Alaina mentioned already. And then once you, of course, complete all your applications for us, you'll see anything you may be eligible for in regards to need-based aid or special eligibility scholarships, performance-based, even internship aid as well. And then grants, of course, from the federal, state, and institutional sources. Federal and state will be something we'll automatically give you if you qualify for it. And institutional is something we will give you from our own source as well, of course. And on the right-hand side, there's just other benefits as well, such as the federal work study for students if they want to take part in that, where they get to be a student worker on campus and earn money at the same time. Then We also work with VA benefits. So if your parents or your family have worked in the military, have VA benefits, veterans benefits, they can then use those to help pay for your student's education as well. And depending on what you qualify for, we'll help you out. We'll help you understand what that looks like as well, and get that applied to your student's account. And then finally, we have loans from different sources, federal, state, and private sector. Of course, if you need to, we'll help you guide you through that as well. What's your best options, what that looks like, and just kind of going over the whole loan process as well. That being said, where does most of this financial assistance come from? So the sources that you see here are the four main sources that you'll see of financial aid. The first one being the federal government, where you'll see examples such as the Pell Grant, supplemental grants, the work study program itself, and other things such as loans, as long as you submit the FAFSA. And then, of course, you'll have the state of Texas will offer some assistance as well in terms of like need-based grants, other public and private assistance as well. They have their own work study and then other loan options for Texas resident specific students. And then, of course, the third option where you'll see the majority of aid come from would be the colleges and universities themselves. So we will offer the students based on their application, scholarships and grants, and then, of course, any options for loans and work as well. And finally, the other source of income, the other source of assistance you'll see is from the private sector. Let's say your family or family friend works at a Fortune 500 company that has scholarship opportunities for your student, etc. There are some nonprofit agencies, even like a church, for instance. Your high school, that'll be another source of financial assistance to keep an eye out for, per se. And then diving a little bit more into the scholarship piece, we have the academic scholarship piece, what we talked about a little bit already, but that will be determined by the admissions office. And we have some of those people here today that can talk to you more about that later if you have more questions about it. But this is, of course, going to be automatically reviewed when you apply for admission into TCU. And then they will notify you as well, like via email and or other email and maybe other sources, but they can confirm as well. And then what we work with here at the financial aid office, more importantly, is the need-based piece. And of course, if you forget everything else I tell you today, remember this. If you want to apply for need-based aid, you need to do two things. The family needs to do two things. One, complete the FAFSA application, and two, complete the CSS profile application. And I'll get into what those look like a little bit more as well. So complete those two things, and you'll automatically be reviewed for financial aid. And that being said, going a little bit more into the merit scholarship again, it is still based on that student's performance, not at all on their financial status. So we won't look at the financial piece of your family if you're looking for just a merit scholarship. And those scholarships, if you've already seen online, are like the deans, the founders, or just the TCU scholarship in general. You'll see those options online as of right now. Again, the primary criteria you'll see is the high school GPA, as well as the rigor of the curriculum, SAT and ACT scores, which are optional, of course. And then the secondary criteria is everything else, your extracurricular activities, leadership, and all other experience as well, including work experience. These can be very competitive, so keep in mind that even if your student qualifies for a certain level of scholarship, they may not receive it just because there may be other tons and tons of other applicants with a 0.01 more GPA, etc. It's very competitive every year, and of course, always apply as early as you can. That way we can get your information in and get you that response as quickly as we can as well. All right. That being said, performance scholarships. Another thing students take advantage of depending on sometimes their major. So let's say, for instance, a student is applying to be an art major or a music major. They want to play the piano professionally. They may have an audition prior to coming to TCU in regards to a scholarship or just aid in general. So let's say, for instance, a piano player wants to, come to TCU to play the piano. They would come audition. They would be notified ahead of time via email, more than likely, as to what they need to do to get this audition, and then they will then be determined whether or not they get some assistance that way, etc., and move forward. One that every student can take advantage of is the marching band scholarship, for example. A student doesn't have to be in music to be a part of the marching band here at TCU. And I know as of today, the marching band offers $4,000 to your student directly to them, not even to the TCU account. It goes directly to their pocket, just to be a part of the marching band for the full semester and a little bit into the spring semester as well, as just one example of a performance scholarship. In some cases, they can be very competitive, especially if they're program based. And again, you'll be contacted as well as long as you've declared your major per se. And these will be combined with other aid if your student and family qualify. So if they have a FAFSA and they have need per se, they may have FAFSA need based, assistance as well as their music scholarship per se. And of course, like I mentioned, is maybe specific to your major. So just keep that in mind whenever you're applying to TCU, that there may be other available assistance for you as well. That being said, this right here, for all those families, especially the seniors, if you are looking for additional assistance, whether it be need-based aid, whether it be based on just merit alone, or a mix of both, this right here, if you scan this right now, you will be taken to our Horned Frog Scholar Search. This is where we house all of our scholarships that are like endowed to all of TCU. So let's say for specific majors, for specific groups, etc. There, I know there's a scholarship on there right now that talks about if your family or if your parent was a previous TCU athlete, then you will qualify for this scholarship. There are specific ones on there as of today, but these open up and refresh in January. So if you've scanned it, you will see most of these have closed, but they will refresh in January. And for those of you that are seniors, you want to look up the keyword first year, and that will give you access to the scholarships that will be available to you as you come into TCU. And we'll release the results of the scholarships over the course of the summer, just rolling as we get to them as well. After all, we review all of the applications. So I'll give you a second to just scan this QR code, and then you can hold on to it. It'll be the same link throughout all 4 years that the student is here, and they can keep applying to these scholarships year over year. And again, most of them will open up in January, but they'll be notified via email if there's a new one that comes out or any changes or anything like that that just results in more scholarship opportunities, of course. All right. Now, we'll get right into the need-based scholarship piece. So, need-based scholarships and grants will be determined primarily from those two things I mentioned earlier, the FAFSA or TASPA, and I'll get into which one you should do moving forward, as well as the CSS profile. And whenever you complete these things, they'll give you a number at the end. This number is called the SAI, or the Student Aid Index. Don't worry too much about that number, but that is something we use to calculate how much need or how much aid your student will receive. And I'll go into that a little bit later as well. This number, this SAI, measures a family's resources, and it's all about the discretionary income. So, with the way the calculation works, we'll take in and keep in mind how much, students are going to college at the same time, how many people are in the family, what your assets look like, and go into not just your income, but the whole picture per se. Everything's holistic here at TCU. So as well, going into what discretionary income means, it's the amount of an individual's income that is available for spending after the essentials, so like food, clothing, shelter, etc., have been taken in consideration. One thing I get asked a lot is if there's like an income cutoff for qualifying for aid. Well, like I mentioned before, we take a holistic view at a lot of these applications, or all of these applications, excuse me. So it depends. There's never a specific cutoff where it's like, oh, as long as you make less 40,000 or less, you're automatically guaranteed aid. No, that's not the case. Families that make 100,000 may get some need-based aid because they have a family of 6, a family of 5. We take in consideration the entire family's situation, and then we'll go from there, of course. And so here's what the FAFSA looks like as of today. You can find it on studentaid.gov, and I know a lot of you have already applied for it or have completed it or are trying to. I know for sure that the FAFSA, your high school counselor can definitely help you with what to do in terms of completing the FAFSA, but we're here available to answer any questions you have as well. But just know that this is what it's going to look like, and that's where you'll find it on studentaid.gov. And then another question I receive is, whose income do we report on the FAFSA when in terms of the family? And let's say a family is, a single parent, or they're married and they divorced, etc. The rule of thumb is, if let's say a parent is divorced, or there's multiple parents that are separated per se, the person that makes the most money, the most income, will be the person that will be required to complete the FAFSA with their student. That's the rule of thumb. Of course, there's some situations where that's not the case, but that's usually the rule of thumb. And if you see, of course, if the parents are married, both parents will have the information on the FAFSA. If they're separated, the parent that provides the most financial support to the student, like I mentioned, will be the one that completes it with them. But if they both provide the exact same amount of financial support, then usually it's going to be the parent with the greater income or assets. That's usually the rule of thumb as well. And then if they're remarried, then the parent and the step parent will both be someone who will help complete the FAFSA as well with the student. And then widow would be the same as the single parent. Just the single parent will be the only person that needs to complete the FAFSA alongside the student. And then for the CSS profile, that one will require all parents that are in the picture or not even in the picture as well. So if the family was separated, we would still require the step parents information as well as the biological parents information as well. Of course, we're happy to hear the family situation in case of some, special circumstances per se. We'll be happy to hear you out and see what we can do to like make sure that your student and family gets the most financial aid based on your circumstance. And we'll go from there. But as of today, every application through the CSS profile needs to have all parents' information on it as well. All right. That being said, the TASFA. I mentioned it a few times already. Who needs to complete the TASFA? Well, if you've completed the FAFSA, you do not need to complete the TASFA, but the people that need to complete the TASFA usually can't complete the FAFSA because they don't have they're not federal, what do you call it? They're Texas residents, but not usually don't have a social security or are not, there's another term for it. I'm losing it a little bit, but at the end of the day, if the student is a Texas resident, the family is Texas residents, and they don't have social securities and they would need to complete the TASPA. This is for those, these are for, again, you see right here the application on the right-hand side. It's very similar to the FAFSA. It asks the same question, but you would then just be able to send it to us and then we'll review it and then finalize it. And we'll do the same thing that we do with the FAFSA and give you as much money as we possibly can using this almost similar, almost exactly the same form. So like I mentioned, they have to meet the residency requirements, have to have lived in Texas for 3 years, and they plan to apply for permanent residency as well. So you complete the TASFA and any supporting documentations will need to be attached, such as a tax transcript, a W-2. And if it's a male student, verify that they're registered with the selective service as well. And then y'all can send us all that information and we will go through the application just as if you were a FAFSA applicant as well. So one or the other, but not both. That's the one thing you need to remember as well. And then moving on, the TASFA. Do you get different, opportunities with the TASFA? No. The thing is about the TASFA is if you're a Texas resident and complete the FAFSA, you'll get the same opportunity as those that just complete the TASFA. And here are some of those like example aid programs that are available for all students that are also Texas residents. So there's a couple examples here. The Texas Equalization Grant is a popular one that we give out to most students that are residents and qualify for it. There's work study opportunities and access to specific loans for Texas residents like the Cal loan. But these are just a few examples that will be, the few examples of aid that will be available to Texas residents as well. And this is what the CSS profile looks like. You will find this on collegeboard.com or .org, and then you'll be able to complete it here. It's just like the FAFSA in terms of asking for your income information, asset information, but more in depth in terms of asking for more in depth, like the family picture, as well as more specific questions regarding the families, like, financial status per se. And then once you complete both of those, we'll review your information and then, of course, give you a financial aid package as quickly as we possibly can. And this CSS profile can be completed as of today. If you're planning to apply to TCU and apply for financial aid, you can complete the CSS profile today and send it to us, and we will start working on your application. You'll be a little bit ahead of the game at that point as well. And moving forward, the cost of attendance for TCU. What is that? Well, the cost of attendance is not the sticker price before I mention anything else. It is what we estimate a student will spend if they were to come to campus, live on campus, etc. because as you can see here, there are a few things that are estimates. So the first two are not. Tuition and fees is the same for every student, whether you're out of state or in state, etc. Housing and food will be there'll be different options, but all will be the same prices, or not, excuse me, different options. And if a student were to select one option and a different student selected the same option, it's the same price for those two students. Books and supplies will be an estimate number that we give every student. Travel expenses is an estimate number, and personal expenses. Those are all estimates to combine into one cost of attendance, which is the estimated number that a family may spend a year for their student to come to TCU. All right, that is not the sticker price. That's the main key takeaway from this slide. And this is what goes into it. So how do we calculate need? How do we know how much money to award a student based on their eligibility? So we take the cost of attendance that I just mentioned on that previous slide, and we subtract the student aid index, which again is that number that comes out of the FAFSA and CSS profile. And whatever's left over is how much need the family has. So, excuse me, we take that need and then move forward with awarding as much as we possibly can to help the student. Now, there's a lot to this slide, and I don't want you to get overwhelmed. This is a comparison of two schools, and these numbers are completely made up, that resemble a public school and a private school. The first school, College A, resembles what a public school would look like. Again, made up numbers. College B will resemble what a private school would look like in terms of cost. And again, this is just an estimate, made up numbers. And College B would resemble what we would look like in terms of being able to award aid. The main difference here is if you look at both of these colleges, the same family is applying to both of these colleges. At the end of the day, both colleges, the family will need to pay the exact same amount for both colleges. At the very bottom, you'll see that they only need a $4,000 unsubsidized loan to pay for each college. And how is that possible? On the left-hand side, we have what the student is receiving from the public university, which is state grant, institutional grant, work study and subsidized loan. And at the end of the day, they'll owe a $4,000 unsubsidized loan to pay for their remaining balance. Well, on the right-hand side, something that resembles more of what we do will be the student will also receive that same state grant, but they'll also receive an academic scholarship for us for a large amount, an institutional grant that again is just our money for a large amount, and then work study subsidized loan again. And then at the end of the day, all they would need is again just the same amount as they would need from the public school. The difference here is just because a school has a higher sticker price doesn't mean you're going to pay more. In most cases, and especially in our case, we'll be more able to help out your student, especially if they need the assistance. That way they can make their college dreams a reality per se. So yes, again, the sticker price doesn't mean is what you're going to pay. All right. And that's the main takeaway from this slide as well. That being said, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you pick the school that's right for you. That's right for you. And there's three things to keep in mind whenever you, especially tour the colleges if you haven't already. Do they have the academics that you need? Do they have the program, the major that you're seeking? Do they have the social life, the social connections you're going to make, the athletics per se, the college football? I mean, that's one of the main reasons I came to TCU. But I'm kidding. But that was something I was really looking forward to taking part in, of course. And then finally, the net cost. Again, it's not the sticker price, but what it is you will be paying for in terms of the school per year. The main idea is you want to pick the best of all these worlds, and we hope that's TCU, of course. That being said, the best fit is going to be there for you. It's up to you what you want to go with, but we hope that is with us. And then here is something you might want to take a picture of. The contact information for the financial aid office in particular. You can come visit us anytime now. Monday through Friday, we're here 8 to 5 p.m. We're on campus. You can come visit us in the Harrison building. That's our address. And that email, you can use that email to contact us, ask us any questions that you have, specifically to TCU, of course. And then, of course, you can also, like I said, visit us or send us mail, like maybe your student received a paper scholarship and you want to get that applied to their student's account. You can mail that to us as well. And that's our number. You can call us 8 to 5 and we'll be happy to help you out. All right. That being said, we will now go into questions. And Alaina, you can then let me know what questions I can answer for everyone here today.
Great. Thank you so much, Abraham. This has been so much information. I hope everybody has gotten the information they need. Students, if you have additional questions that haven't been answered yet, please use the Q&A function on Zoom. Obviously, if you're unsure how to do that, feel free to use the chat, but we do prefer the Q&A, if that's possible for you. So the first question we have here, Abraham, is, are the quotes on the net calculator accurate to what a student may receive in scholarships and financial aid?
So that's not as cut and dry as I wish it was. So the answer is yes and no. At the end of the day, the one thing you want to take in consideration, the one thing you want to be taken finalized per se, is what we can offer for you in terms of like your financial aid package after we've received all of your applications, like your CSS profile and FAFSA. We will then give you the best, closest estimate that you'll receive. That financial aid calculator may not take in consideration how many people are in your family, how many people, what your resources look like, how much you're spending, or how many of your students are going to college at the same time. And we will then award as much aid as we possibly can based on your circumstance. So take that calculator with a grain of salt. In some cases, it does work well. In some cases, it doesn't. It's a yes and no, and we will get into the nitty gritty, I like to say, whenever you apply with us specifically. But thank you.
Great, thank you. We have a student actually that is wondering, it says here, let me just read the question.
Sure.
$300,000 is my estimated SAI from the calculator at studentaid.gov. Will I qualify for financial aid or needs-based scholarships?
When it comes to need-based aid, it is unlikely that you'll qualify only because if we go back to that calculation that we talked about earlier, we'll take your SAI and we'll take your cost of attendance, which is here at TCU, is roughly 85,000 as of this year. Of course, that changes year to year. And we'll subtract your SAI from it, and then we'll see how much need you have. That's not to say you're not going to get anything, but it's to say that you are less likely to receive any need-based aid just because your family's financial situation on paper looks like you may not need it. Now, if there's other things going on in the family, of course we want to hear you out. We want to see what's going on. If that's not reflective of y'all's current financial situation, then we want to know so that we can give you as much money as possible. Because I know what's on paper doesn't reflect what's exactly going on with the family themselves. And so thankfully here at TC, we're able to listen to everyone's situation, everyone's story, and we're happy to. So we're here for it. That way we can give you the most we possibly can based on your specific situation. So one thing is on paper, the other thing is letting us know what's actually going on behind the scenes. So yes and no, another one of those answers.
Okay, great. Thank you. Um, Here's a good question. Do I need to have both my CSS profile and FAFSA completed by the admission deadline to be considered for scholarships and admission?
So for need-based aid, we would want you to, that way you can get your answer as quickly as possible. But once you've been admitted, I know for sure we will definitely be working diligently to get that information to you even quicker. But just as long as you get that to us as quickly as possible, we will then be able to give you that answer as quickly as possible as well. But you don't necessarily have to have them in before your admission or before you've been accepted or denied per se. So as long as we have them in both, as long as we have both of them in, we will then start working towards getting that financial aid package ready for you and your students. So at the end of the day, the quicker the better. But yeah, just the quicker the better. And if you don't have them in quickly, we'll still be looking over them over the course of the spring and even into the summer in some cases as well.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
When should we expect a financial aid and scholarship package from TCU?
Of course, kind of like I mentioned, it's rolling decisions. Once we have everything that we need, we'll start, giving those answers out. And what I predict for this next year, as long as the FAFSA comes out on December 1st and everything looks well there, I can predict that we can start handing out, or sorry, we will start releasing that information, your financial aid package, as early as January. But again, subject to change. It all depends on if everything works smoothly, especially with the FAFSA side of things. But as long as we have all that information, we'll get it to you as quickly as we can. So hopefully, in the best case scenario, as early as January, if not even sooner, if everything works even better. All right.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, we do have one student who scanned the QR code in your presentation. Do they have to be admitted TCU students in order to use that website?
You do not. You do not have to be an admitted student. So you can use it, and then once you come to TCU, you'll know. Sorry, you can start applying now. As long as you're applying to the scholarships that are specifically for first year students, you can start applying as soon as today. But I don't believe they're available as of now. You can start applying as soon as January. We'll start looking over those, of course, over the course of the summer, and then we'll start awarding them to students over the summer and into when they come in the fall. So no, in the short, you do not have to be admitted to start applying to those scholarships. Some of those questions will ask, like, what are your extracurricular activities on campus, etc. Just input as much information as you possibly can, and then we'll take a look at your application from there, of course. But thank you.
And then we have a few out-of-state students who are asking, will their aid packages, financial aid, scholarship packages, things like that, will they be considered different because they're an out-of-state student versus an in-state student?
Absolutely not. So one thing to note is tuition is the same for in-state or out-of-state students. We will not look at your, we will not, all, let me see how to say it. If you're out of state or in state, you'll get the same financial aid per se, as long as like, of course, we're going to look at all the details from the CSS profile and FAFSA. We'll look at where you're coming from. We'll look at what the cost of living is from your location as well. And then we'll award as much as we possibly can using all the information you've given us. So there won't be any difference in terms of how we look at your application from in-state or out of state, except, the idea of what your cost of living is in your area. So we'll take a look at everything holistically. So there won't be any negative factor for being out of state or in-state per se. And that's the best way to put it.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry, we've got a lot of questions coming in, which is great. Please don't
Okay,
stop. I just want to make sure we get them all answered.
for sure.
When we're considering needs-based scholarship and the cost of living, is that considering the cost of living, say, from somebody from California? Is it considering California? Or is it considering the cost of living in the state that where the student will be attending?
So it more goes into like how much the family's income is. We'll see, like, let's say a family is making $100,000 in Texas and $100,000 in California. Well, that holds a different amount. So especially in terms of like house value as well, that's something we also look at just based on all assets of the family. We just want to make sure that we're being the most holistic as possible. So we will note where you're from and see how much money, how much income the family has, and try to be as holistic as possible. So we will take in consideration like where you're located and see if that's the norm, or if there's any room for us to help out even more. Same thing goes for those students here in Texas. If that's the norm in your area, I know like Austin, maybe everything's more expensive in Austin as it is in a small town in West Texas, of course. So we'll look at everything holistically and give you the most we possibly can based on your SAI, your application, and everything else just in the application in general. So we will just keep in mind everything in terms of your application for sure. And hey, if whatever happens, please feel free to reach back out to us and say, hey, my family's going through this, we've had this change, etc. Is there anything else that we can do? And then we'll be happy to hear you out at the very least and see what else we can do to offer some more assistance, of course.
Great. For the CSS profile, if a non-custodial parent is not in the picture or there's not an open line of communication, who, first of all, who should the student contact? And then what is the process behind that?
So the we will require all information from step parents, even if you're regardless, in most situations, we will need all information from all parents. But if there's a special circumstance, let us know what's going on, what that looks like specifically in your situation, and then we can see what we can do in terms of maybe not requiring it. But at the same time, it's case by case. We want to hear out every family. We require all family members to be, involved. But in that case, in some circumstances, we will work with you and see what we can do in terms of omitting some of that information if the circumstance, is fitting. There's a lot of special circumstances we can get into right now as to what that may look like, but at the end of the day, it's case by case, and we want to make sure that we're being as holistic for all families, all across campus, with and without parents per se. And we want to just listen and hear what you have to say, and then go from there. We will work with you, and make sure you send us an email, especially after you complete your application. Send us an email or shoot us a call or visit us. Let us know what's going on, and then we can see what we can do in terms of that CSS profile and the requirements per se. So, we'll try to be as flexible as we can. But just let us know what's going on and we'll work with you. That's the easiest way we can help you out.
Great. What happens if I incorrectly fill out my CSS profile or FAFSA? Who can I contact to make updates?
So for the FAFSA, you can make an update on the FAFSA website, studentaid.gov. Again, so let's say you submitted a FAFSA and there's some incorrect information, your date of birth is incorrect, or something else along those lines. You just go back to the FAFSA website and make an update, make a correction. There's a way to do that on the website itself. And then for the CSS profile, that was a little bit trickier. Sometimes you may not be able to restart or make an edit to the CSS profile. So if you're having trouble with that, you can let us know. But in most cases, you would need to in most cases, you would have to make a copy of the CSS profile, make your corrections yourself, sign it, send it to us via email, and then give us why the correction was the correction that you needed to do. At the end of the day, you send us an email if there was a problem, and then we'll work with you on that. So if you forget anything, always reach out and we'll be happy to help.
Great. I don't know how to fill out either application. What do you recommend I do?
Yeah, so the first point of contact for both of these applications, someone that I know has done it even more than I have, would be your school counselors. They should know your the FAFSA and CSS profile inside and out. In some cases, like if you're in the Texas area, there's a Go Center, which is like the counselor's room. You can go visit them. But your high school counselors should be able to assist you, no problem. And if they can't, then shoot us an email, shoot us a call. We'll try to help you as best we can in terms of getting that application completed for you, or just answering questions on both applications for you as well in terms of what do I put here, etc. So yeah, high school counselors the first contact, great contact. Use those resources as they're available to you, and then we'll be happy to help you out if you still need more assistance. That's for sure.
Okay, another question. How do I fill out the FAFSA if I have immigrant parents or undocumented parents?
Yeah, so I have some notes on that as well over here. So at the end of the day, if your parents don't have a social security number, you still need a parent to fill out the FAFSA form with you. You have to invite them to complete the form. And when you invite them, they need to complete their own profile. They'll sign in, they'll create a password, and they'll make their own profile. But in order to create their profile, they'll need a social security number. Well, if your parents don't have one, there actually will be a box, an indicator that says, click this box if you do not have a social security number. And if they have an ITIN, there's a different way. There's another box as well that'll tell you what to do in terms if you have an ITIN, and you don't put that number into the social security number field. So those are two different things. But going back to the question, there will be a box where you can check that says you click this box indicating that your parents don't have a social security number, and then you'll be directed as to what to do in terms of getting your parents' information for their profile. And that'll look something along the lines of like maybe using a passport or like a residency card from their old or a residency card or other examples of identification that you and your family would then have to send email or mail physically to the Department of Education so that they can then create the profile for your parent. It's a little bit roundabout for sure, and your high school counselors can definitely help you with this as well. But there is a way to do so whenever you invite a parent that doesn't have a social security number. And there'll be more instructions on the FAFSA itself, but vaguely it will require you to send more information of your parents' identification to the FAFSA, to the Department of Education through email or mail. But your high school counselor should also be a great resource for that as well. But yeah.
Kind of with FAFSA as well, staying in that mindset. Does FAFSA affect what academic performance scholarships are given to a student?
Not at all. Short and sweet, not at all. So the FAFSA doesn't go into the merit scholarship that you will be receiving. And I'm sure Alaina and all my compatriots here can tell you the same. It is based on your merit and your merit alone. And that's it. Yeah, the FAFSA will not go into how much you'll receive in academic. It'll go into everything else that you receive, that's for sure.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
This question that just came in is a little more veteran specific. The GI Bill pays out living expenses monthly. Are the housing fees at TCU payable upfront? What if this is placed us in a financial bind to cover the entire housing or food bill upfront?
Oh yeah. First of all, we have someone that is a specialist in VA benefits and what that looks like for you and your family specifically. In the registrar's office, we'll be happy to get you connected with them if you ever shoot us an email. That way they can show you what that's going to look like specifically. So in terms of the GI Bill, in terms of yellow ribbon, etc., it's different for most families. So some families get full coverage; they'll get the full TCU tuition covered, as well as a stipend on top of it, and then housing and meal plan covered as well. And then that will be delivered to your student's account, early in the semester, so that everything's paid for up front. The way TCU does it is our bills are semesterly. So you'll have a bill for the fall semester, so August through December, and then another bill in January through May. All of our scholarships and aid, of course, will cover it evenly, so don't worry about that piece. And so will your veterans benefits. It'll cover it evenly as long as you have the eligibility. So some veterans benefits will only be eligible for students at a certain dollar amount, and then once you reach that limit, you're out. Uh, and some veterans benefits will carry on all 4 years. So this is not a question I can answer with a yes or no. It's again case by case. So we will work with you and your family to see what that looks like specifically for y'all and apply as much as we possibly can, or as much as you would like us to your family's students' accounts. All right. And we will go from there. But of course, if you have any questions about what that specifically will look like, how much you're going to pay up front, etc., we'll be happy to help you and direct you to people that can help you more if need be, of course. But yeah.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Um, are there any scholarships specific to a student's ethnicity?
So the QR code from earlier will show you all the scholarship opportunities that we have outside of the need-based aid and the academic scholarships we'll offer to you up front. I know there were some examples on there that are like you must be of a certain demographic, African American, Hispanic, etc. So the short answer is yes. And they will be on that QR code from earlier, or the Horn Frog TCU Horn Frog Scholar Search if you want to look that up in Google. And again, they open up in January, so have a look there and see if you can find any that fit your description that you would like to apply to. And yeah.
Great. All right, Abraham, thank you so much. I think that's all the questions. If you end up having follow-up questions or you feel like you didn't have enough time to ask all your questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to the financial aid office as well as your admission counselor. As admission counselors, obviously, we are not financial aid officers. We're happy to pass the torch along in that way. But if there is a question that we can answer, we're also happy to help out in any way. In the meantime, thank you all honestly for joining. This has been a very successful event. Shades of Purple is a series of virtual events, so we will be hosting another one. You will be receiving more email communication about that. Our next one will be on November 19th. You're welcome to join. We're going to talk more about ways to get involved at TCU. So maybe if you're still considering TCU as your option, or you just want to know where you're going to belong once you get here, that will be a great virtual. It will be a very similar styled event in that we'll have people on campus who can tell you a little more about the TCU experience. So please feel free to join us. Also feel free to watch out for those emails. Other things we host on campus, obviously, you're welcome to join those at admissions.tcu.edu. You can find all of the campus visits that we host. We also have admission counselors in your areas. So if you say, for example, live in Boston, Massachusetts, and you would like to meet with a regional rep, we have someone there who would be more than happy to either meet with you virtually, or you can see if they'll ever be in your high school, things like that. Okay, so once again, like I mentioned before, that's one of the things I love most about TCU is the TCU community. As Abraham has just proven, we have great resources for students available. Whenever you apply to TCU, you'll also be assigned a financial aid officer. So when you log on to your TCU portal, you'll have communication with them via that route. Um, but as far as everything else goes, um, we have one last poll for you, so let me pull that up. And then feel free, once you've finished answering this question, to either jump off. And then, like I said, feel free to email us any additional questions you may have. Anything you'd like to add, Abraham?
No, thank y'all for having me. Of course, you'll have our contact information if you have any more questions. Feel free to shoot us a call or email. Once you complete your both your applications, FAFSA and CSS profile, we'll start taking a look at them and get you a response as quickly as we can. I know it can be stressful, especially when you're applying to multiple colleges on which college you want to pick. And but the financial piece is huge. And I would know I'm a first generation student. I had to pay for school myself. I didn't, I had to make sure that I could, first of all. And so we'll get that quickly as we can to each and every one of you and your families. Again, the FAFSA opens up December 1st as of today, and we will try to get you something as quickly as we can, and we're hoping to do so in January, if not even earlier if possible. So bear with us with the process, but we'll be happy to help you out if you reach out with any questions, and go Frogs.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.